Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Supply Chain. So, I have a question to kick off the show. Today, we're talking about AI, and up until now, we've seen mixed results, and often that's down to people. So, according to McKinsey, what percentage of companies report that their CEOs sponsor their AI agenda directly? What do you think? Well, let me know your guesses over on social and keep listening because I'll let you know the answer at the end of the show. Now, today I'm joined by a company that provides a reliable, scalable, low cost infrastructure platform in the cloud that powers hundreds of thousands of businesses in 190 countries around the world. They're an industry mega brand. And who are they? Well, it's Amazon Web Services. Now, Amazon Web Services is the world's most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud, offering over 200 fully featured services from data centers globally, millions of customers, including the fastest growing startups, largest enterprises, and leading government agencies use AWS to lower costs, become more agile, and innovate faster. And so today I'm joined by Colby Ward, Senior Software Development Manager. Now, Colby specializes in scaling engineering teams, driving innovation in AI and cloud, and turning cutting edge tech into practical solutions, not just flashy demos. And we're going to be talking about agentic AI. Colby and I will be exploring the shift beyond automation, why software has to stop dictating how businesses operate. We'll be talking about the importance of change management and driving competitive advantage in new ways. Plus, we'll be asking the big question, which is, are you ready for the future? So welcome to the show, Colby.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you about this and really dive in deep on how AI is going to help our supply chains.
Yes, and it's great to have you on the show. We've been wanting to work with AWS for a while. And so I am super excited to be talking to you today and to let everyone know that this will be the first of three shows that we're going to be doing together. So everybody look out for those in the coming months as well. But for this particular episode, let's get started with a little bit about yourself. Now, Colby, tell us a little bit about yourself. I read you build the occasional robot. And so tell us about that, but also your role at AWS.
Well, sure. Yes. So when I came out of college, I started working for Microsoft, doing some normal tech development type work. And then I actually started my own company, doing
Okay.
product development for about 10 years. And
Nice.
so you get this little bit of taste of how project management and supply chains work, but it was a small business. So it was really only a taste of that. But I ended up transitioning into the railroad where I worked as technical director of supply chain operations. And so we did
Cool.
things like car and train and work order management system. And so a very, very healthy dose of logistics and how do you break up rail cars? How do you make sure the customers are getting the right things? So it is like a moving supply chain in that area. And then eventually I did land at AWS, where when I started, I wouldn't have considered myself a supply chain guy.
Right.
But when I did start, we started by launching different country websites, things like Amazon Australia, Amazon UAE, Amazon Singapore. I was involved in those launches. And so you got a really good taste of the logistics and the supply chain operations and how Amazon does things, which I'm happy to say we do very well. And eventually I migrated over to the AWS side of things, where we were launching this new product. At the time, it was codenamed, but it eventually became AWS Supply Chain, where we're saying, hey, how can we offer supply chain solutions to a variety of customers that want to be able to better operate and automate their supply chains? And so that's where I got into the AWS supply chain side of things. Now, as far as the robots, not a very long story there, but I started in with First Robotic Systems, helping my son in that area and coaching his middle school team and then eventually the high school team
Cool.
in the robotics competitions. But then that naturally evolved into, well, what do you do after the season's over? And so, uh, boys will be boys. So we created some automated robots that drive around the house with automatic targeting systems and used AI to create targeting systems to fire Nerf guns. I don't think my wife appreciates that, but we have a lot of fun with that at home. So good times.
That is awesome. And I love that story. And I want to go back to this code name thing because it sounds so covert. But it's so true. When you're launching something and you're working on something, there's a lot of testing and things that need to happen before you actually launch it and you give a name to it. And so I would assume at Amazon you want to do things a little bit covert before everybody sorts of knows about it and you want to get it right. So I love that. That is so fascinating. I appreciate you for sharing that. So give us a bit of an overview of AWS. Who are you? What do you do? How do you help your customers? I don't think I'm the only one that is really interested in this. I think there's a lot of people in the community that really want to understand what it is that AWS is doing in supply chain.
Sure. So, what I do is I'm a senior software development manager. So, I have many development teams that are on the engineering side that help build tools that you're probably familiar with, things like demand planning solutions, supply planning solutions. We delved into this concept called insights, where we're going to give deeper insights about, hey, your projected inventory, what you can do, things like that. And so that's where AWS supply chain started. Now, I started on the data lake side. So, as you know, everybody's heard the expression garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yep.
And so nobody seems to focus on that area enough. They seem to say, well, here's our solution. Whatever your data is, we'll take it. And nobody focuses on how can I connect your data in an easier way. And so that was one of my jobs is to build what we have called the AWS Supply Chain Data Lake, where we have a canonical data model with a series of connectors that will pull that data from your ERP, or you could push it. But the point is, it collates all that data together. And then we validate it and we run quality controls on it. And that way, our solutions that run on top of it, whether it be demand planning or supply planning, like I was talking about, actually give you valuable results that make sense and mean something, not partial results. Our goal is to eventually eliminate the spreadsheets on every supply chain or desktop. Everybody knows if you go to any supply chain on the planet, you're going to go in front of a planner screen and there's going to be Excel. It's going to be popped up right on that screen, right next to the planner. And why is that? It's because they're pulling in data from different areas because it can't all fit in the system that they have.
Yep.
And so that's what we've been doing in AWS supply chain. But I don't think it's any secret now. AI and AI agents is the new big kid on the block. And we are working in that. I can't get into too many specific details. And yes, we do have a new code name for that project. We love code names at Amazon. We have tons. But the we are working on the agentic AI solutions and how we're going to bring that to supply chain to help solve those problems. So I
Mm.
can talk in a general sense, but not too many specifics on exactly what we're doing there.
I appreciate that. And I think that's a real struggle these days is the data, right? The data is in different locations, right? It's disparate, it's not collaborative. And it's very difficult to be able to bring in all of that information and make sure that it's usable for the user, right? And I think, like you said, that's kind of where the spreadsheets come in, but that's also where the mistakes happen because you're downloading and uploading and you're adding information and you're sharing it. And then that, like, what version are we on? It tends to bleed into those questions. What version are we on? Am I using the right version? Do I have the right data? Is it even spelled correctly? And I know that Formula One, I think, was using spreadsheets for their inventory up until I think 18 months ago or something like that. So it's still a very prominent thing. People are still using spreadsheets. And so your goal of making sure that every single supply chainer is not using spreadsheets anymore is one to be talked about. Now, as an industry, I think we've been talking about digital transformation for a long time. And honestly, the results have been a bit of a mixed bag, right? We've seen some success, but equally created some complicated tech stacks that have really locked teams into things instead of liberating them or maybe empowering them. What's your take on this? What is your take on where enterprise technology has focused over the last couple of decades? What are the positives? What are the negatives? How have we gotten to where we are right now? And it almost feels like we have to untangle ourselves a little bit.
So if you look at, I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone listening to this, but if you look at a supply chain right now and you
Mm.
look at where it was 20 years ago, I think one of the things you'll notice is it's not very different. Like you're running software that was around about 20 years ago with updates and some new lipstick and things like that. But really, our supply chains in the supply chain SaaS solutions that were given really failed on the dream to run a full autopilot for your supply chain. And instead, what they did was they helped you monitor it really well. It was kind of, does it automate your supply chain? Not really. Does it optimize your supply chain? Even though everybody sells an optimizer, only partially, like a little subset it might optimize, but without all the data in one place, it actually can't drive data-driven decisions. So what
Mm,
I found is it's really just a better way to get a view of what your supply chain looks like today. And it certainly didn't deliver on the promise on how do we automate. Now, how do we get there? I think the way we got there, frankly, is we didn't focus on the data side enough. So what would happen is you would have vendor after vendor come in every few years, usually with a change in leadership, like you have a new CTO, and that new CTO is like, "Hey, I need to make a change." And so they would go and they would look at another piece of supply chain software. And so what you would have was you wouldn't have the second version of SaaS take over the first version. You would have an addition. So fast forward yourself 10 years later, now you have 10 different versions of supply chain software. You've
right.
gotten rid of 0 of them. And now you have 10 different versions, none of them speaking the same language. And they've kind of loosely coordinate answers. And that's why I actually don't blame the planners for having the spreadsheets up on their desktop. That's why
Yeah.
they have them up there. And so how do we bridge that gap? I think you need to focus on a collation mechanism,
Mhm.
something that lives on top of it that is able to collate and help you make data-driven decisions well. And that has not been done to date.
Well, and I think it's also like IT teams are really stretched at the moment too. And as much as we want to bring everybody into the decision-making process, sometimes we really just need a solution to a challenge that we're having right now. And we can't wait 6 months or maybe 9 months to figure that out and implement at the same time.
Absolutely. I've also noticed that too. At the end of the day, if you don't work for a tech company, that IT process is yes, I have the necessary evil of IT, but at the end of the day, I need to move these boxes in the warehouse. I need to get the
Right.
trucks moving. And that's where the focus is going to be. And it's also where the capital is going to go. So it's not a hit on the IT people. It's a fact
Mhm.
of you have to get this business done and you
Mhm.
have to do it with the resources that you have. And where do you want to allocate those resources? Perhaps you want to build more warehouses. Perhaps you want to build out a new trucking line or enhance your transportation lanes, right? Perhaps you want to focus on that. You might not want to focus on the IT side, which is where you enter the SaaS solutions. That's why SaaS solutions exist. It's if
Right.
you don't want to focus on being the next big IT supply chain solution, come to us. That's what we're hoping to provide with AWS supply chain.
Love that. Well, you mentioned agentic AI a little bit earlier on. I don't know how much you can tell us, but I really want to be talking about this today. So, what is agentic AI and how is it different to the systems that we've been talking about?
Sure. So I can talk about agentic AI, no problem. So
Okay.
let's dive in and let's start with a history lesson, a little bit of how SaaS software vendors, and the reason I focus on SaaS is most supply chain solutions are delivered in a SaaS format, right?
Yeah.
So when you build a SaaS system, they're designed to fit any customer need, not your specific needs. So you as
Mm.
a business, this SaaS software has to fit everybody else that is purchasing this software. So when you're looking in the tens of thousands of customers, that software has to be built in a somewhat generic way. And so, what do? They offer configurable options, they offer different API hooks so you can integrate, but you're molding a more or less generic system. The problem is, supply chain problems aren't generic. Supply
No.
chain problems are specific. When you translate the word supply chain, what you're really saying is business operations. So it's a massive topic. And everybody's business operations operate quite differently. Yes, we share the same terminology, but one person
Do
saying,
we?
well,
I have to ask you because
yeah,
visibility means like 50 different things to different people.
use the same words with different meanings, right?
Okay, fair,
Everybody
fair,
has
fair,
different
fair.
meanings, but we're using the same words. That's about all that is similar amongst different supply chains. They operate completely differently. Even when they say, oh, I have the first in, first out policies and things like that, it means something different depending. Oh, I meant at the hub, not the spoke, things like that.
Yes,
So
it's so true.
so you know they all operate very differently. So do you go to a generic solution to solve all your custom problems? Well, that's typically what's been done. And honestly, they've done pretty well. They've done the best they can. But that has helped shape the way the businesses operate, not the other way around. Let me give you an example.
Mm.
If you're in a warehouse management system and the way you do your cycle counts or the way you do your picking is different than the way the software is designed, guess what? You say, hey, we've all invested in this software and we're going to change the way we do things just slightly so it fits with the software. That's kind of the way it's been done historically. Now, what do AI agents give you? So, with a SaaS solution, you're really getting an orchestration layer that's all glued together. What I'm buying is not complex solutions. What I'm buying is system A can talk to system B, which can talk to system C and calculate calculation D, right? And it pulls all that together, and that orchestration layer is what sells SaaS software. But what does AI agents do? That orchestration layer becomes more or less commoditized, meaning
Right.
it's not that valuable. An agent can call tool A from one vendor and tool B from another vendor. So I could get a forecast from vendor A, I could get a replenishment plan from vendor B, I could get a supply or a safety stock optimization from vendor C. Now I don't need to go to one vendor and have it all there. So the orchestration is more or less a commodity, and AI buys you all that orchestration and it can make reasoned responses for you. So it can call many of these tools effortlessly. And the most important thing, why could we not do this well before? Is because the if then relationships, if this happens, then call this. If that happens, then call that. Those became far too complex into this web of nastiness, right?
Mhm.
AI can reason amongst those if thens and say, okay, well, in this scenario, I have enough context and I speak natural language. So I know when to call tool A, when to call tool B,
Hmm.
and it can pull all that together for you very, very nicely.
And there's no bias, there's no
Oh,
second
absolutely not.
guessing, right? When humans are doing these things, we are driven and we all have biases, good, bad, but we're all driven by biases. We're all driven by second guessing. We're all driven by how we feel about that particular thing on that particular day.
I think you bring up an excellent point because I think it drills into where AI is really going to shine. We've all been on the line and you're like, hey, that truck isn't coming for whatever reason. And then you're like, that's no problem. I'm going to call Gary over at Truck Co. And I'm just going to pick up the phone. And Gary at Truck Co. gave me that truck. No problem. It's on the way. But that person that did that, you're not sure if you're making an optimized choice. They're doing something to
Right.
solve that problem, and they are solving that problem at the time. But wouldn't it be wonderful if you had an AI system that could gather all the different trucks that are available and make that choice for you so you're making an optimized choice? Gary might have provided you the truck, but it might be 3 times more expensive. It might be 5 times more slow than the other truck that's available at another vendor.
But also, they might not be even in the area.
That's true. That's true.
Right. And so when we talk about optimization for not only who you're talking about, we're talking about optimization throughout the chain and who we're talking to. And I understand they want the business, right? That trucking company wants the business, sure. But we also have to optimize and make sure that they're picking up loads and stuff that's not going to cost them a crap ton of money because they're in different locations and it just doesn't make any sense for them.
Oh, 100%. The truck business is there to sell you what? Trucks. They're not
Yeah.
there to sell you the best decisions. And so,
Mhm.
albeit they're there to solve that problem right now, a lot of times what you're talking about biases, you have personal relationships that will get in the way of it.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, you might have called Gary and he goes, ooh, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to cancel that contract. You have no idea how true that is. He wants your business. He wants to show you that he's doing one for the team, right? But
Mhm.
in reality, you have no idea whether that's the best decision.
And it might not be the best decision for him and his driver either, like I said, depending on location and things like that too. And I think, when we can get more optimized, and trucking companies, they also have platforms and software that they're working with to help optimize for their customers. But I think that optimization needs to run for everybody. And I think we need to get used to the idea that this is partnerships and collaboration. And you know what? This load might not be what we need at this particular moment because we don't have a driver position there. And I know we're getting totally off topic, but maybe there's a load that's a little bit closer that can pay, the same amount of money and makes more sense for my business as well. And this is where I think the optimization is going to optimize supply chain as a whole and just help everybody work smarter, not harder.
And how do you do that? Because I think you're touching on a really important point. I call it kind of the best employee principle.
Hmm.
What if you're managing a team of, let's just say, 5 people? You're going to have one superstar in that team. And you kind of wish the other 4 people could operate as well as that superstar. Well, how can you do that? Well, AI actually allows you to do that by modeling your superstar's behavior and systematically building out their process. Now, like you were saying, you're using data to drive these decisions.
Right.
And you shouldn't really be overriding that once you get it tuned, meaning, okay, when these series of events occur, I want to do A, not B.
Hmm.
Okay. That's because you have complete data, and that's what you want making a decision that will ultimately make the most financial or the best fulfilling to promise sense for a given
Yeah.
business. That's what you want to do, not conjecture, not just leaving it up to somebody's best instinct.
Yes. Second guessing. I mean, we're not
Right.
second guessing ourselves, and leadership isn't second guessing the decisions. It's where we
100%.
want to be,
When you're
right?
operating on data-driven decisions, you don't have to second guess it.
Yeah. So, we talked earlier about data, right? You said that we need to have good data, obviously, that's coming in. We need to make sure that we get the garbage out. And agents need good data to work effectively. And that's something I think businesses have typically struggled with. There's a lot of data in supply chain. And like you said, they're coming from a lot of different places. So, how do you think that businesses can really tackle some of those outdated processes that you were talking about? And what is the risk to agentic AI success if that deep context isn't in place? Because remember, like it's one thing to put something like that in place. It's another to make sure that you are starting at the starting point that is going to optimize and make it the best use of that investment, that implementation, that time.
So I always like to use the analogy. People talk about data and everybody invested in make data, and they say data is the new oil. Well, that's absolutely true. But like oil, if it's unrefined, it's almost useless. Yes, you can maybe gear some machinery, but you certainly can't fill cars with unrefined oil. So simply having that data is not enough. It needs a lot of work to get it in a useful state, very similar to oil. Unfortunately, there's no magic wand for this. And a lot of businesses are finding that their investments in these big data lakes are nice, but they're not as helpful as they thought because I've never witnessed data that's not like dirty inherently. When it comes through, there's a lot of muck that you have to scrape through. And a lot of times it's very partial. Like, hey, why is my order referencing products that don't exist in my product catalog? That's weird, but it happens all the time.
Hmm.
So the next step naturally is to put a series of quality and validation exercises, which start to clean that up. And without that, honestly, AI, you're not going to be able to utilize AI well enough. It's only going to work as well as the data it's provided. But what I've noticed is that a lot of companies are always focused at the end of the pipe, meaning once my data is all great, AI is just going to solve it. We're going to throw AI at the problem, and all my problems are solved. And that's where the magic comes in. It does not happen that way. AI agents are really good at taking instructions, doing some reasoning, calling tools, and tapping data, but it won't automatically clean up all your data for you. Not automatically. I will say this at AWS Supply Chain, I was really proud and happy to actually focus at the beginning of the pipe. So not only do we help customers connect their data, we help clean it up and validate it. And how do we do that? Our first AI that is public today is our AI auto association mapper. And so we actually crawl the source catalogs and we help identify the meaning of your current data and then map it into our canonical data model. Now, why is that useful? It's useful not just to take from system A and make it into our system, but it takes your Excel spreadsheets. It takes all your disparate data and it reduces the time needed to actually get your data into our system. So we can
Hmm.
pull it, you can push it, but it takes AI and says, hey, I know what you're doing here. And I'll automatically build the transformation so your full ETL pipeline is built for you and it collates all that data into a useful way. Then we take that extra step, the refining part. We take that extra step and we build quality rules that check for things like referential quality, or do you have nulls in all these columns? Is your data consistent? Are there wild parameters like negative numbers in date columns, things like that? We go through that and we cleanse your data. And so therefore it's a lot more useful. And that was actually where we focused at the beginning. Now we're kind of shifting gears and focusing towards the end of the pipe. which
Mm.
is like we feel like we can get your data in a good state. How can we make really good, valuable use of that data to automate your supply chain?
Well, and that's really what you need. You need the foundation. Like you said, I feel like people get to this is what it can look like for me, but not really where do we need to start and where do I need to be as an organization to be able to start? And if I'm not even close to that, what can I do?
So I think some of the ways you're going to have your input systems taken care of. So even if you're running in Excel, honestly, in a lot of ways, you have an advantage because if you're going from Excel, and I mean just Excel now, where you don't have a full ERP of data, not I have Excel as well. But if you're,
Plus.
there are plenty of companies that are still running their supply chains on Excel, which is kind of surprising to me. But it's actually quite easy to transform and get and leverage that data because it's already in a singular tabular format. So the good
Right.
news is we can get your data in, we can get it clean, we can get it golden, right? The bad news is you still need to mark down your processes. So let's talk about what AI can bring to the table. So ultimately, what AI can do is it can free you up from doing the mundane and menial processes. I'll give you an example. If you have a procurement process where you're going to automatically check your projected inventory, you're going to take your forecast data, you're going to take your inbound supply, and then you need to check with that vendor if they have availability, right? You
Mhm.
can have AI automate that entire task for you. So to run that replenishment plan. Right now, you have people doing that because perhaps they need to email a vendor and make sure they have enough, or you use the EDI capabilities. But either way, you have to manually do that in a lot of cases. AI can automate that entire process for you. Now, what's the bad news? The bad news is that process in your company documentations probably is in somebody's head, or it's outdated or written down very, very poorly. And so this is where I've said a few times that Markdown is the new power language. And so what I mean by that is write down your processes very, very clearly. Take your best employees process and write it in a step-by-step instruction. What is your job roles and what do you do? And most importantly, what are the decision points you have to make in order to find an outcome, right? Once you do that, AI can really assist you with that. And the best part is it frees you up from the menial so you can start focusing on the strategic exercises that you should be
Mhm.
focused on.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? There needs to be more time for strategic planning, strategic thinking, and sort of what happens next. What is the future of our supply chain? What do we want that to look like? How do we want to manage that? Right. But we need to be able to have time as supply chainers to be able to do that. Now, I want to sort of focus on the competitive advantage of agentic AI because we've talked about, why you need it. We've talked about how you can get there. But I wonder, companies that are already using agentic AI in this way versus companies that aren't, what are the opportunities that they're missing out on?
So I'll say this, the people that aren't, the first thing I would say is start putting your strategy together. Do not mistake this or dismiss this as the new blockchain, for example. I know a lot of people in supply chain, we focused on blockchain. And what I like to say is, other than crypto, blockchain's kind of a solution without the right problem. And so don't mistake that for this. This is way closer with where AI is today. It's way closer to the dawn of the internet or email or Google search, for example. All those things were transformative in our industry and how things work together. So I would start putting an AI strategy in place. Now, in terms of what does it mean for a business that leverages it? One of my favorite philosophers, Naval Ravikant, says, wealth is making money while you sleep instead of tying your inputs directly to your outputs.
Oh, fair. I like
Okay.
that one. All right.
And so what it means is if you're working 1 hour and you get paid for 1 hour, you have symmetric inputs to outputs. Every hour you work, you make X amount. What you want to do is build asymmetry in that process. So how do I have the least amount of inputs for the most amount of outputs? And so AI is literally what you can put to work while you sleep. Now, let's consider enterprise A that doesn't use AI. Well, you can do things the way we've been doing it for the last 20 years, and that's fine. Eventually, you're going to be the lumber yard that never bothered with a chainsaw, right? There's a reason we move from axes to chainsaws, right? AI is your chainsaw. It's going to help you move much, much faster. And more importantly, while you sleep, AI can work.
Right.
And so I think the growth will be absolutely asymmetrical, meaning you put in an investment up front into AI, and it blows out the amount of outputs that you can create.
And the amount of things that can get done on a daily basis.
100%. And
Yeah.
so people do talk about, well, what about job displacement and things like that? Well,
hmm
actually, I I think if your business is growing at a fast enough clip, you really don't have to worry about that. So what it's going to do is it's going to do things more efficiently and faster, right?
hmm
So can your sales team outpace the speed at which you can do things faster? I hope so, right?
Right. And if you can't, you need to you need
You
to
probably
start
need to change your
hiring some more
strategy.
salespeople.
Exactly. So can my sales team keep getting contracts? A lot of companies, most that I've seen, you have a 3-year plan. Well, what can I do now that that's condensed to 1 year?
Right.
Well, all of a sudden, that just changes your strategy and your sales cycles. And
hmm
we all know about the S&OP process, right? Well, change your S&OP. Now you can do things 3 times as fast as you were able to do them before. And I really
Huh.
like the way this stacks on top of each other. So, like I'm saying, you're not just doing the tacticals anymore. So, for example, why did that shipment come in late? Now I can answer that question very, very easily. That shipment, I'm immediately, AI can answer that in seconds, and it won't take somebody 3 days to figure that out. Now, okay, well, if I have a problem with that vendor, can I get a vendor scorecard on that vendor right now? AI can give you that. Maybe I should be looking at backup vendors. Maybe I should change that relationship. And more often than not, we know things like our inventory policy and our vendor selection is very much an antiquated process on some rule that was added probably before you even joined the company, and that happened to just keep going.
hmm
Now you can fix all these little problems and make your output vastly superior to what it is today.
Well, and it changes the questions that you're having at the executive level, right? It changes the question to if we can do this in 1 year versus 3 years, what does that mean for us in 3 years?
100%. So it's not only just saying, how do I accelerate my roadmap? It's a direct conduit your business growth. Like I said, if you are in a stalling industry where your sales are not good, well, yeah, it's possible job displacement can occur. I'd start looking, right? You
But
always want
also,
to.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but also AI can help with revenue streams and different revenue streams and
Oh,
how you're positioning your product and how you're selling your product. And actually, there could be a way from a competitive advantage standpoint that you could outpace your competitors by changing the way you use and think about AI within your product or your service offerings that could actually turn that around.
absolutely, especially if you're not focused on the mundane activities, right?
Yeah.
And I'm focused on how do I create new business lines of opportunity.
Yeah.
That's because I'm not focused on how do I fix this expedite in the next 10 minutes so my fill rates don't go through the floor, right?
Yeah.
So I think once you're freed up from the monotony and the mundane, you can focus on those strategic aspects of your business and really see it grow.
And it's exciting.
I hope so. I'm
Right?
excited by
I'm I'm
it.
excited about it. I'm actually exploring a bunch of different options within my business and how we offer things around what is happening within AI and what is actually possible. Right. And I'm focused on, sort of the next 6 months. I'm not focused on necessarily the 2 or 3 years because it does change very quickly. And so some of that long-term planning is going to have to change, but you can ask better questions. Do you think this is going to level the playing field for a lot of people or a lot of organizations?
Long answer to that. Let me segue into that a little bit. But for yours, one of the mistakes I see people making is I like that you're focused on the next 6 months. However, when you evaluate the capabilities of what AI can do, make sure you don't turn yourself off to it can't do that now. Even in the last 2 years, it's advanced at an amazing clip, like code
hmm
ability to code and things on your own have really gone through the roof. So what I'm saying is it might be worth doing that investment now because of when you're done with that in 6 months, it might be looking at that 2-year vision, is
hmm
what I'm saying. So just keep that in mind as you're going. Now,
I am totally
oh,
on
go
the
ahead.
same page with you. That you're giving away all my secrets,
I'm
Colby.
so in terms of level the playing field, that's really complicated. I will say this that people have talked about this at length, and I think time will tell. But they say the next billionaire could be a single person working out of their garage.
Whew.
And I don't know if that's accurate because I just kind of feel like with more employees, with more of those tools, that you can scale more. Um, I do think it creates the opportunity for those that otherwise would not have the opportunity. So, in that sense, I do think the established players are definitely concerned. I think the established players are concerned because the ecosystems in themselves are no longer selling, meaning,
Mhm.
or they won't be in 2 to 3 years, meaning that glue layer, hey, this all works together, is far less valuable than it was even last year and the
Mm,
year before that. And so, to that extent, I think it opens up niche areas where people can really come in and prosper. And honestly, in AWS supply chain, we're new in the SaaS space in that area. So, we sure are hoping this levels the playing field to allow us an entrant versus the people that have been entrenched for 20 plus years.
absolutely. Now, when I was doing some research for this particular episode, there was a couple of things that came up for me that I had never heard before. And so I'm hoping that you can explain what they are and how they can help us sort of guide agents to achieve. And I want to call this the next level of intelligence because that's really kind of what we're talking about and where we're going and what it looks like for organizations. And I think it was ontologies, process and knowledge graphs. Can you talk to us about those?
Sure. So we're definitely getting on the more technical space, but I think I can provide an explanation that makes a lot of sense. So if we're going back to the analogy before where data is the new oil,
Hmm.
ontology is the new refinery. And so, what ontologies do is it provides a semantic layer to that data or the semantic context of how that data is related. So, for example, if you have just a normal data store today, maybe you have a product table and an orders table, and you say, yep, orders have that product. But what happens when that shipment becomes late for that order?
Hmm.
All of a sudden you just saw later, everything's time based in supply chain. Later, that date just changed. Wait, hold on. I thought I was getting in that last week, right?
Hmm.
But now the date just updated. Well, you can do a lot of relations to see why, okay, did that relate to an EDI message? Did that relate to a vendor sending that? It's very difficult. And that's actually what a lot of planners spend their time doing is tracing what went wrong, right? So an ontology and a graph is kind of the native language in which AI speaks. So a graph is just a series of nodes. So think of a bunch of circles
Uh-huh.
connected by edges, right? And the cool part is this. I would have a product node and I would have an orders node. When that EDI message came in, I just attach an EDI and I connect the lines between the two.
Hmm.
And so I say EDI changed order, and that edge is the verb. It changed the order, for example. And so why is that important? Because that would be the operational layer that you feed the AI agents. So you feed all these really, really great LLM models. They can read that graph natively and they can say, oh, well, your order changed because it found that EDI node, because this EDI thing came in last week and this vendor changed the date to this. And it might even have a vendor message. The vendor message was they're out of capacity on the manufacturing. So immediately, you don't need anybody to do any research. Immediately that's available to AI. Now, here's the best part, Sarah. The best part is no code. Make your data look like that. You don't have to build functions. You don't have to pay a programmer to
Right.
figure out what went wrong. It's that you've modeled your data. Now, that you do have to pay a programmer for sure. But once you've done that investment, your data is self-describing. And so it can just figure it out. So I don't need to write tons and tons of functions in the back office to say trace EDI reasoning and things like that. I just literally point an AI agent at the ontology and presto, I get a lot of answers.
Kind of, and maybe I'm taking this too far, but it kind of makes me think about the orders coming in late, right? You
Yes.
have brought in some extra staff because maybe it was a full container that needed to be destuffed and your warehouse staff was doing other things. And that's not coming in now. So, what do you do for the day? How do you deploy everybody in different directions to be able to make sure that we're still managing to hit sort of the KPIs or maybe the orders that are coming in and things like that? And how do you deploy them in different ways? Can it do that? Because I
Well,
almost feel like if we can be told that an order is late and then we can change the whole operational schedule of who needs to do where.
so that's the autopilot side. So I
Got
think
it. Okay.
ontologies will be useful for that, but
Mhm.
that won't be the key. The key there is that process documentation I was telling you about.
Okay.
So if I'm able to implement your superstar employee's process and I'm able to feed that to an AI agent, and then I hook it to your tools, say your staff scheduling, your
Hmm.
warehouse system, things like that. then absolutely it can do that. So what it will do
Game
is it'll
changer.
say, okay, I've hit this shortage due to a late shipment, execute remediation plan. And it will call all those tools and it'll make intelligent reasoning based on your best employee's playbook. So getting those playbooks or those processes defined, or the run books as we call them, if you can get those really ironed out well
Mhm.
and you connect the tooling, yes, it will be able to do that. But you're kind of, can it do that today? Not yet. But where are we in a year? Quite possibly.
Magic. I got two more questions. This has been fascinating, I have to say, Colby. I love this conversation. We talked earlier about, sort of that change management piece, right? Because it's a huge part of transformation. 80% of any digital transformation is really focused on the people. What would you say? Like, how should businesses be thinking about people alongside technology to ensure the best chance of success? Because I don't think it's an either or. I think that it has to be and.
I think I'll go back a little bit to what I was talking about before, where I touched on it. I think if you visualize this as a tool to help you with your job, you're immediately going to be better off. Meaning, view this if you're in the lumber industry, everybody was taking axes out to the trees before, and maybe this is not the most PC example, but now I've given you chainsaws. You can do a lot more in the same amount of time. It didn't take away your job, it just made your job better. It made your job easier. And so, what I would say is make sure you have an AI strategy in place. Like I said before, don't be dismissive of this is just the new fad. It really is not. It is transformative. And have your strategy in place. And where would I start? You had asked before, like, where do I start? You must start with the data. And I am biased towards data, and they're going to be like, when they walk away from this conversation, Colby just talks about data a lot. Correct. Correct. And the reason I say that is because everybody will focus on the big one. Like, hey, here's your ERP. How do we connect that? Sure. What I would focus on, everybody's going to focus on, and you will eventually solve that. But what I would focus on is all the supplementary data do I need? What about the emails that are being sent to vendors? What about the phone calls? How can we capture that in a way that could be codified? How can I take the Excel? I would start with the Excel sheet on the planner's desk. Why are they using it? And figure out what they're collating together and figure out a way to get that data into a collated system. From there, AI will take the reins. I think there's enough tooling coming out over the next couple of years where you could leverage the AI. But once again, it really won't be there without the data. And view it as a tool to help you. I know a lot of people are kind of simply threatened by this. I wouldn't be. I think at least in the I can't put a time frame on it, but in the immediate futures, it is a tool that's going to help you do your job a lot better. It is not
Hmm.
going to be the replacement tool. Now, if you're an Uber driver, maybe, but that's a different industry entirely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, last question. Are we ready for this? What's one thing that you want people walking away from this conversation thinking about or maybe taking some action on?
I would embrace it. I would grow from it. I would not dismiss it. And I'd remember what Naval said, make money while you sleep. Have these AI agents. I often think of what if you had an AI army doing what you needed to do?
Hmm.
Boy, wouldn't that be great? Well, that time is now. That time is becoming very, very possible. And so, how can you vastly create your outputs based on the exact same inputs you have today versus a lot of people go to the cost cutting measure. How do I reduce my inputs, my people, whatever? I wouldn't focus on that. Saying, given the same amount of inputs, how do I vastly increase my outputs? And I think if you walk away with that message, AI is here to help you do that.
Love that. Well, we talk a lot about a competitive advantage in a difficult and disrupted market. So, really diving into the potential of this technology to help us build better businesses is really, like I said, incredibly exciting. So, did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, I asked you, according to McKinsey, what percentage of companies report that their CEOs sponsor their AI agenda directly? Well, it's fewer than 30%. Ooh, that's a low number. It's clear that bringing people into the transformation process from leadership down is key to driving success, but you also don't want to miss out on it. So, if you want to embrace the potential of agentic AI and step into the future, head over to aws.amazon.com to learn more. A massive thanks to Colby for joining me and to the team at AWS for making this episode happen. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show, and check out more content content from the best and brightest over on letstalksupplychain.com. We've got the incredible guests, innovative strategies, and transformative solutions you cannot afford to miss. Colby, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your insights around agentic AI and what it actually means for enterprise business.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.